All right, let's dive right into this. When we think about international business, it is so incredibly easy to just get completely wrapped up in the hard numbers. We focus on supply chains, logistics, exchange rates, drafting up these complex international contracts. But in today's explainer, we're going to bust a major myth. We're going to see that global business isn't actually just about those tangible, on-paper elements. At its absolute core, international business is fundamentally about people. And even more importantly, it's about the invisible cultural assumptions that those people are bringing to the table every single day.
Which naturally brings us to a really fundamental question. Why do these massive global business strategies fail? Because, let's be honest, it happens all the time, right? A company develops a brilliant, absolutely foolproof strategy in their home country, they roll it out internationally, and it just completely bombs. No way around it. Why? Well, because culture affects absolutely everything. It dictates exactly how business partners negotiate, how managers lead their teams, and how whole organizations go about building trust. So if you ignore cultural differences, your brilliant strategy is practically guaranteed to stumble.
And this dynamic right here perfectly illustrates what happens when those cultural wires get crossed. Just think about this classic clash. You've got a manager from a highly direct communication culture. They walk away from a big meeting thinking their foreign partner was being completely unclear, maybe even a little evasive. But meanwhile, that foreign partner is sitting on the other side of the table thinking the exact opposite. They think the manager was unbelievably rude and insensitive. The key takeaway for us here is that these aren't just individual personality flaws. They are deep, entirely predictable cultural patterns. And the good news is, if we can map them, we can navigate them.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. Why culture means business. 2. Hofstede's dimensions. 3. Myers culture map. 4. Comparing the frameworks. 5. A real-world negotiation case study. And finally, 6. Limitations and takeaways.
Okay, moving into part 1, Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Think of Geert Hofstede's framework as our macro-level map. Basically, it's a 10,000-foot view of broad national cultural values. He developed this highly influential model that identifies 6 specific dimensions describing how entire societies organize themselves. We're talking about power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. Together, these 6 dimensions tell us how a society generally handles relationships, authority, time, and even things like personal freedom and enjoyment.
Let's actually zoom in on a couple of these, just to see how they impact business in the real world. Take power distance. This is all about how much a given society accepts the unequal distribution of power. So in a high power distance culture, hierarchy is just accepted as a normal fact of life. Titles really matter, and employees expect their leaders to give very clear, final instructions. But flip that to a low power distance culture, and equality is the expectation. Subordinates will openly question decisions, they'll address leaders informally, it's a whole different vibe. The crucial point for us is that a multinational company literally has to adapt. You might need visible, formal authority in one region, but a totally participatory, open-door style in another.
Now consider the really profound contrast between individualism and collectivism. Honestly, this explains exactly why certain incentive structures totally fail. In an individualist culture, folks emphasize personal goals, individual rights, direct accountability. So those performance-based rewards, like Employee of the Month, they work perfectly here. But in a collectivist culture, the emphasis shifts completely to group harmony, loyalty, and shared responsibility. If you drop a highly competitive individual reward system into a collectivist market, you could actually destroy team morale. You absolutely need team-based incentives instead.
All right, part 2, Myers culture map. So while Hofstede gives us those broad societal values, Erin Myers' culture map provides our micro-level view. She basically translates those massive national values into practical daily behavior. Her focus is on the ground-level rules of the office, which she breaks down into 8 specific scales. Communicating, evaluating, persuading, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, and scheduling. These are the actual scales dictating exactly how international managers get their day-to-day work done on, say, a random Tuesday afternoon.
Let's look closely at the communication scale for a second, because this is a massive stumbling block for international teams. In low-context cultures, communication is completely explicit. People mean exactly what they say. The message is literally entirely in the words themselves. But in high-context cultures, the meaning is indirect. It's hidden in the tone, the nature of the relationship, the shared history, the nonverbal cues. So you can see how a low-context manager could easily come across as blunt or insensitive, while a high-context communicator might seem maddeningly vague to their low-context peers. And trust me, it gets even trickier when we look at the evaluating scale, specifically focusing on how we give negative feedback. Imagine an egalitarian manager who truly believes in direct, open criticism. They sit down in a culture that expects indirect feedback, and they deliver some really blunt, constructive criticism to an employee. Well, without even realizing it, that manager just caused their employee to lose face, completely destroying any workplace trust in the process. You absolutely have to know how criticism is delivered and received in the local context.
Which leads us to Part 3, comparing the two frameworks.
We've got these two incredibly powerful frameworks, but a smart international professional doesn't just pick one and ignore the other. The real magic happens when we synthesize them. Think about it like this. Hofstede's main focus is on broad national cultural values, so it's best used for understanding general tendencies across whole countries. Meyer's framework, on the other hand, focuses heavily on workplace interaction, making it your go-to guide for managing day-to-day communication and quick decisions. Essentially, Hofstede explains why hierarchy matters in a particular country, and Meyer explains exactly how that hierarchy changes the way you should run your 2 p.m. status meeting.
Next up, Part 4, a 5-step process for cultural application.
So how do we actually apply all of this before walking into a high-stakes international meeting? Well, you can follow this 5-step process. First things first, identify the countries and cultures involved. Step 2, analyze the likely cultural differences using Hofstede's broad dimensions. Step 3, drill down into those expected workplace behaviors using Meyer's specific scales. Step 4 is crucial. Connect those differences directly to the specific business activity you're doing. Are you marketing, hiring, negotiating? And finally, Step 5, develop a culturally appropriate strategy based on all that intel.
Let's put that into practice with Part 5, a cross-cultural negotiation case study.
We are going to put this 5-step process to the test with a really dynamic 3-way cross-cultural negotiation. Let's set the stage. We've got a food exporter based in the Philippines, and they're trying to strike a deal with a distributor in Germany and a retail partner in Japan. Using our two frameworks, we immediately see 3 very different profiles. The Filipino team heavily values relationship building and interpersonal warmth. Now, the German distributor operates with high uncertainty avoidance. They want incredibly detailed planning, very direct communication, and task-based trust. And meanwhile, our Japanese retail partner has a long-term orientation. They're looking for harmony, careful group consensus, and they heavily rely on indirect feedback.
The absolute most crucial point here is that the exporter must adapt its approach to each specific partner. Because if the Filipino exporter tries to just use their natural relationship-first style to casually breeze through highly technical contract terms with the Germans, they will lose the deal. And if they try to aggressively push the Japanese team for a quick top-down decision, they will lose that deal too. True cultural intelligence is all about diagnosing these differences and adjusting your behavior to fit the context perfectly, all without losing your own professional integrity in the process.
And that brings us to Part 6, limitations and key takeaways.
As we bring this explainer home, it is just incredibly important that we acknowledge the boundaries of these models. We have to remember that these frameworks outline general tendencies. They are absolutely not fixed, absolute rules, and you definitely cannot use them to stereotype individuals. People vary widely based on their education, their age, their specific industry. Plus, we know cultures change over time, right? Younger digital-first professionals might act very differently than historical norms would suggest. And of course, corporate culture itself plays a massive role. But above all else, these frameworks are entirely neutral. They are never ever to be used to judge one culture as somehow superior or inferior to another.
Which really leads us to the core thesis of our source material today. Quote, "The best approach is to combine cultural analysis with observation, respectful communication, and adaptability." The frameworks we talked about, they just give you the map, but you still have to look out the window, observe the actual people sitting right in front of you, and adapt respectfully.
I want to leave you with a really thought-provoking question taken straight from the source's reflection activities. Why should you avoid assuming your own cultural style is normal or better? It is so incredibly easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the way we do things is just the default setting for the rest of the world. But as we've explored in this explainer today, challenging that invisible assumption is the very first step toward truly succeeding in international business. Think on that next time you jump on a global video call.